to our quick little video on pressure gauges. So here it is. All pool filters have a pressure gauge. Every one of them, they have a pressure gauge. This one is on the top. They're usually on the top of the filter. Sometimes you'll have a sand filter and they'll have a little multi-port and they'll be over here, but they're pretty much always on the top of the filter. So what do? They read the water pressure inside of the vessel. So water goes in here, it comes out of here, and it reads the pressure inside of this tank. Right there. And that's all it does. And it reads the pressure in PSI, which is pounds per square inch. Now, what's that pressure going to tell us? Well, it tells us when the pool is dirty or the filter's dirty and we need to clean it. We'll get more to that in a second. Now, there's two types of pressure gauges for pools. There's a bottom mount. That's on the bottom. And then there's a rear mount or back mount where it's in the back. Pretty basic stuff right there. And we stock both of these, the bottom and the rear mount, because there's different situations where we need either one of those. So what's the pressure gauge purpose? Well, there's only one purpose, really. Seriously, one purpose, and that's to tell you the pressure in the vessel. Well, what does that tell you? Well, it tells you how dirty the filter is. So that one filter, here's what the inside looks like. All these cartridges inside, these are pretty dirty. So what would happen is when you turn the pump on, this pressure gauge would be, say, right here, for example. Well, this thing says start. It's right here. Now, as these filters get dirtier and dirtier and dirtier with junk from the pool, just normal stuff, the pressure gets higher and higher because it's not flowing through, so that pressure builds up. And this needle will go farther and farther and farther. And what this is saying is clean filter right here. When it would hit this point, it's time to get those filters cleaned. Now, it's usually about, we tell people 7 psi higher. For example, some of our pressure gauges we replace, they don't have this little ring that says start and clean filter. So what we do is we give it a cleaning or a backwashing or something like that, and let's say it goes up to the 20 here. Well, we take our handy dandy marker that we're always having in our pocket, and we mark it. We literally put a marker line right here, and then we take our marker and we'll go out to like right here. And that's going to tell us, this is where it starts, and this is when we need to backwash it. Because that way we can sit here and if it's between these lines, okay, but if it's around this point, it's time to backwash them or clean the filters or whatever we got to do with that type of filter. That's all these are for. How dirty is it inside the filter, and is it time to clean it? Now, sometimes we come across a broken pressure gauge. Maybe we walk up to it for the first time, and it's broken. They may last 5 years. They may last 5 days. So there's no telling. These things are like a disposable product that you just, hopefully it lasts a while, and if it doesn't, who cares? It's not the end of the world. These things cost about, we charge the customer, I think, $22 to replace them. So it stinks, but it is what it is, and we got to have them. Now, how do they break? Well, from calcium buildup, getting up inside of there, water's flowing through this at all times, and so it could rust out. Cold weather, it could just break or do something weird. Sometimes they'll get dropped, and then they break. This one looks like somebody hit it or something. And sometimes they just get flat worn out. They're cheap. They're not supposed to last forever. So how do we tell? How do we tell if it's broken? Well, one way is if the dial is just way off, or if it's stuck, like right here. This one's probably stuck. I'll bet you if you turned off a pump, this dial's going to stay there, even with the pump off. Well, then it's broken. It's stuck. Or maybe you turn the pump off and it comes down, but it comes down right here instead of down to here. Well, it's broke. There's something off. And Maybe you turn the pump off and it's right here. You turn the pump on and it shoots up to here. It's just off. It's broken. And when you turn the pump off and on, this dial should move. And if it doesn't, we know that gauge is broken. And the gauge can look brand new, and then there's something inside here is broken. So it's just a normal part of it. So what do we do then? Well, it's time to replace it. So we replace it. And how do we do that? Well, we unscrew the old one. Let me show you real quick. Most of the time, almost every time, you can just grab this thing and unscrew it and twist it out. You don't need a tool or anything like that. Sometimes they get rusted in place, and you just grab some pliers on this part right here and you can turn it out. So we unscrew the old one, pull it out, turn the pump off, obviously, because we'll be shooting water out everywhere otherwise. And then we tape the new one. We use Blue Monster thread tape. We use about 4 to 6 wraps. So you would take your thread tape, a little trick that I'll tell you, instead of having to rethink it over and over, is when you're looking down, say you had this pressure gauge and you flipped it, you're looking down on this part. Always go clockwise. So you'd stick your tape here and then you'd go clockwise around it this way, 4 to 6 wraps. Honestly, 4 is probably plenty. And then you just break it off and then screw it in. So this guy's wrapping this thread right here. He's going to basically go, 4 or 6 times, and this is going to build up, and so that it makes a better seal. Now, when you're screwing and then screw in place of the old one, just screw the new one back in. Now be very careful when you do that. Very careful, because you're always going to be screwing into plastic. I don't know why they do that. Well, it's to make the parts cheaper, but wherever you screw a pressure gauge in, it's plastic. It's a plastic part, and it's probably old. So be very careful and only screw it in as much as needed. Only. Don't crank it in till it stops. Don't just do one more turn because you can. Hand tighten it only, and only as much as needed. If you turn it on and it's just dripping a little bit, then just turn it a little bit more and get it in there. But you can always tighten it. But if you break it, the body that it screws into, then you broke it, and we're spending hundreds of dollars replacing that. So just don't break the filter, and be careful. You'll probably do this with somebody else before you do it yourself, so you'll get an example of it. But just some warnings there, some things to be cautious about. And then, so we've replaced the pressure gauge. Now what do we do? Well, it's time to charge the customer. So if it's a weekly customer, which may not mean much to you right now, but if it's a weekly customer, then we're going to add it in dosages in our software that we use. We're going to take a picture of the old one so they don't think, oh, you didn't replace it. Where's the old one? We'll take a picture of the old one, throw it in the trash for them, and we're going to write it up in the service email as well. Hey, we replaced your pressure gauge. The other one was dead, something like that. Take a picture, and we're going to add it in dosages. If it's another customer that's not a weekly, then we enter it in a QuickBooks invoice. That's just another story right there. So that's it on pressure gauges. You know the whole scoop.